What if the anxiety you feel right now was trained into you before you ever had words for it? Emotional silencing is what happens when a child learns, through punishment or withdrawal, that expressing a feeling or a need is unsafe. Not occasionally, repeatedly, until the nervous system rewires itself around that lesson as permanent truth. Behavioral science has turned a rigorous eye toward how early environments shape the nervous system's default settings, most systematically since the 1990s, when developmental psychologist Jack Shonkoff and colleagues at Harvard's Center on the Developing Child began documenting how adverse early environments alter stress response architecture. This isn't common sense dressed up in jargon. It's scientific investigation. A child's nervous system isn't passive. It's a calibration machine, constantly reading the environment and asking one urgent question: is it safe to be myself here? When the answer is reliably no, the system doesn't break. It adapts, quietly, efficiently, permanently. The punishment doesn't have to be dramatic. It can be a cold silence after tears, a sharp look when a child says they're scared, a dismissal dressed as strength: stop crying, you're fine. Each instance is small. The accumulation is not. Here's the counterintuitive part. Suppressing an emotional signal doesn't erase it. The signal goes underground. The nervous system keeps generating the alert: fear, need, distress, but now the child has no sanctioned way to discharge it. Over time, something subtle and devastating happens. The nervous system stops treating the original emotion as the problem. It starts treating the emotion's existence as the threat. Feeling becomes dangerous. The alarm now fires at the alarm itself. This is the origin of hypervigilance. The body stays on high alert, scanning constantly, not for a threat in the outside world, but for the internal signal that once brought punishment. The nervous system is wired to intercept itself before anyone else can. Neuroscientist Stephen Porges, whose polyvagal theory maps how the nervous system evaluates safety, showed that the body's threat detection architecture doesn't distinguish between a tiger and a memory. It responds to the pattern of danger, not the source. A child who learned that expressing need triggered rejection has a nervous system that files rejection alongside physical harm. Both demand the same survival response. Behavioral scientists understand this as a prediction problem. The model built in childhood, "the world isn't safe for my feelings," keeps running in adulthood. The brain isn't replaying the past. It's forecasting the future based on the only data it was ever given. This is why adult anxiety so often feels sourceless. There's no tiger, the meeting went fine, the relationship seems stable, but the nervous system isn't responding to today. It's running a calibration built decades earlier, in a room where silence was the only safe answer. Behavioral science examines how incentives shape behavior. In a childhood where silence was rewarded with safety, the nervous system learned a clear incentive: suppress and survive. That incentive doesn't expire when childhood ends. It runs in the background of every adult interaction. Let's correct a common misconception. Psychological research isn't just common sense. Common sense says, grow up, move on, it was a long time ago. Research says something harder and more precise. The nervous system doesn't experience time, it experiences pattern. Psychologist Hazel Rose Marcus has shown that culture shapes what emotional expression even means. What counts as a dangerous feeling in one household differs from another. The definitions shift. The suppression mechanism doesn't. Chronic suppression doesn't stay psychological. It becomes physical. The body stores unprocessed signals as muscle tension, disrupted sleep, a digestive system that never quite settles. The nervous system isn't being dramatic. It's doing exactly what it was trained to do, at full volume, all the time. There's a quieter cost: the erosion of self-trust. When children are repeatedly told their internal signals are wrong, too much, too sensitive, unnecessary, they stop trusting those signals. Adults who grew up this way often can't name what they feel, not because nothing is there, because they learn to look away. But here's the question the research opens up. If the nervous system was calibrated by experience, Can experience recalibrate it? This isn't rhetorical comfort. It's an empirical question. And the answer behavioral science has established is carefully, specifically, yes. The nervous system updates its predictions when it receives new data that contradicts the old pattern. A relationship where expressing a need is met with care, not punishment. A moment where vulnerability doesn't end in rejection. These aren't small things. They're the actual mechanism of change. Naming an emotion isn't a soft skill. It's a neurological intervention. UCLA psychologist Matthew Lieberman found that when people accurately label what they feel, activity in the brain's alarm center, the amygdala, measurably decreases. The signal gets processed rather than suppressed. This is why therapy works, not because it changes the past, but because it changes the prediction. Behavioral science confirms something that can feel radical to someone raised in silence. The predictions you hold today shape the reality you experience tomorrow. The nervous system isn't a fixed object, it's a living prediction engine. And predictions can be revised. That's not optimism. That's how the system works. Here's something that stops most people. A landmark study by James Pennebaker at the University of Texas found that people who habitually suppress emotional disclosure have significantly higher rates of stress-related illness, and that writing about a suppressed experience for just 4 days produced measurable improvements in immune function. 4 days. The body is that responsive to being heard. Hypervigilance in adulthood doesn't always look like panic. It looks like reading every room before you speak, apologizing before you've said anything, feeling responsible for other people's moods, bracing for rejection in relationships that are actually safe. These aren't personality quirks, they're calibrated responses. When a child learns that their needs are a burden, they often build a secondary strategy, become so useful, so agreeable, so invisible in their demands that no one has reason to withdraw. People-pleasing isn't a character flaw. It's a survival strategy the nervous system constructed under real pressure. Contextual factors in adulthood can accidentally re-trigger the old calibration. A manager who goes quiet after feedback, a partner who seems distracted, a friend who takes too long to reply. The adult nervous system reads these as the same pattern it learned in childhood, not responding to now, but to then. So, why is this pattern so difficult to recognize from inside it? Here's the mechanism. When a nervous system has been calibrated to treat its own signals as threats, self-reflection itself becomes dangerous. The act of looking inward triggers the alarm. Insight requires the safety that suppression was designed to avoid. Behavioral science examines how incentives affect motivation and behavior. If the nervous system learned to suppress because suppression was rewarded, then building new incentive structures, environments where expression is genuinely safe, isn't therapy as luxury. It's targeted nervous system retraining. Recalibration doesn't require a single dramatic breakthrough. It requires repeated, small, specific contradictions to the old prediction. Each time you express a need and the world doesn't end, the nervous system updates its model. The update is small. The accumulation, over time, is not. Here's the callback. The nervous system adapted, quietly, efficiently. That means the anxiety was never irrational. It was a rational response to a specific environment. The system didn't fail. It succeeded so completely, it never received the update that the environment had changed. In adult relationships, this distinction matters. Reassurance alone doesn't update the nervous system's prediction. Evidence does. Consistent, repeated evidence that expressing a need produces safety rather than punishment. Words help. Patterns change the wiring. Zoom out, and this becomes a public health question. The Ogilvy Annual 2024 identified early emotional suppression as among the behavioral science challenges with the broadest societal reach. Chronic anxiety rooted in early emotional silencing isn't a private struggle. It's a pattern distributed across millions of nervous systems, shaped by environments that could have been different. Both Pennebaker's disclosure research and Lieberman's affect labeling studies point to the same entry point. Write down one feeling you dismissed this week. Not to analyze it, just to name it accurately. That single label is the first data point your nervous system needs to begin updating its prediction. One feeling, one label. You weren't trained to be anxious. You were trained to survive a specific silence. Now you have words for it. Name one feeling you dismissed this week. That single label is where the rewiring begins.